Hey, what's up, fellas? Welcome to Man Up Friday with me, Mike, your mentor. Hope you guys had a good week. Uh, we are at the halfway point here. If you're watching the replay, thank you for joining me. I believe this is going to be some good stuff tonight. If you're new to this page, you'll learn a little bit about me and my story here in a minute if you want to stick around. But the theme of this page is to restore honor back to being a man in this country, in this society. Because if you look out the window and pay attention to the world and see everything that's going on, all the craziness, you'll notice that, or in my opinion, that's a result of men not accepting responsibility for their marriages, for their roles as fathers and as leaders in the community. And I'm doing what I can to change that in my life and to change that in as many other men's lives as possible. So before we get into content, I just want to pay respects to the person who came up with the stuff that I talk about on this Man Up Friday every Friday. Um, and that is Dr. Robert M. Lewis, who wrote The Quest for Authentic Manhood, and this copy of the workbook that we go through and that we've been going through on where all this content came, and it really changed my life in a very profound way at a time when I needed some serious help. And we'll kind of, if you're new, we'll kind of talk about that a little bit here and what that looked like for me. So I guess enough with the pleasantries on the introductions. We're going to jump right into this tonight so I can have you guys on your way. So let me share my screen here. All right. Titled this The Good News Solution to the Heart Wound. And before we get into it, I want to just give you guys two important reminders. This is the last session of the first half of Men's Fraternity. Feel free to invite your friends or anyone you know to join us Friday nights, roughly around 9:15. I'm going to start posting every Sunday the weekly schedule on this page of what I'll be doing in terms of going live and what I'm going to be talking about and the expected times for the week. Typically, we're here every Friday, somewhere between 9:15, 9:30 if there's something going on. But if you can't show up, you can definitely watch the replay. Count on it. It's June 14th. Haven't missed a day yet. Don't plan on missing a day. I made this commitment to you guys, and I plan on continuing to keep that. The second thing is if you really want this to be a life-changing experience, it's imperative that you complete the looking back questions that deal with unpacking the wounds in your life. I suggest you block out a couple of hours, leave or unplug your phone, and get out of the house to a place of peace. I like to go out in the woods or go to the park where I grew up playing basketball, where I could just be by myself and think about these things and ask God to direct me and understand these things. Without a doubt, men who do this tough work make tremendous strides in their manhood and become all around better men, better husbands, better fathers, better leaders in their community. But it doesn't start without us exercising some courage and looking back at the wounds of our life. After this video, in the comments below, I will post a link to the questionnaire so you'll be able to download it and then go through those at your own pace. But once again, I highly encourage you to do so, and I highly recommend it. It's life-changing, and yeah, it's life-changing. So if you want a better marriage, if you want to be a better husband, if you want to be a better member of your community. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but what I am saying is you do have it within yourself to do it. You just need to take those steps and to man up and make it happen. And this will get you on the right path to making that happen in your own life. So let's jump into this tonight and talk a little bit more. So I want to talk about two perspectives regarding what we've been talking about the last couple of weeks, and that's the heart wound. So the first perspective is my life, and I just want to rehash some things for you guys that have been along with me on this journey about my life, and for the people that are new maybe watching this, because people all around the world are watching these things and they're learning, and I think that there's a lesson in all of this, or there's a few lessons that we'll talk about as well. So quick review. So my life, right? So the first little thing you see up here in the upper left hand corner, the first picture, I labeled that Father Wounds Part 1 because that's one of the, I think, 3 pictures I have of my dad, and we were celebrating my sister's birthday here, eating some cake. But my father, he was in and out of prison until the age of 10, and him going away at a young age is when that father wound was planted in my heart, right? The first time, that's where originally I felt the abandonment. I felt the rejection. And psychologists say the first 6 years of your life, I believe it's first 6, are the formative years of your life, and what happens to you in those first 6 years can not will, but can set the stage for the rest of your life. And so that's when this father wound took place in my life. And I think it was made pretty profound because every time my dad got out of prison, he did feel remorse about what he did, and he would promise us that he would never go back. And then he ended up going back again. So having to relive that trauma over and over again just had some effects on me that we'll talk about here. So the middle picture there is a picture of me, my sister, my younger sister, who's 2 years younger than me, and then my brother, who was 3 or 4 years younger than me. Man, it's been so long. And we were kids, and I was the oldest of the 3. So at a very young age, I was told I was the man of the house, right? That's what my grandpa told me. That's what my uncles would tell me. I was the man of the house because the one who was supposed to be the man of the house wasn't there. And that came with responsibility, and that came with expectations. And even though I was young, and I probably didn't understand fully what that meant at the time, words have power, and when we speak words over people, they carry weight, and they can attach themselves to that person and influence their identity. And for me, it was scary. It was lonely, and it was definitely very difficult at times. So the third picture here in the upper right hand corner, I just labeled that Beware of Dog, and we just talked about how, if you've been with me this far, and we've talked about how I had an affinity for dogs at an early age. One of the first stories my mom told me is how I crawled out into the middle of this road on this busy street we lived on with a pail and a shovel, and I was scooping up the asphalt into the pail while a group of dogs ran around me, feverishly protecting me from the traffic as the people drove by with their cars honking. And then this picture that you see of me in this hospital gown with my hand bandaged up is my second encounter with a dog. And my mom set me down at a garage sale and I crawled up to a dog that was chained up, and I guess tried to pet it, and my mom turned around to the dog uh, basically swinging me around in the air by my hand, I think, as the story goes. So yeah, so I loved dogs back then, and I still have a special place for dogs in my life. But you know what? That also, life has a way of taking away maybe some of your courage, taking away some of your adventurous spirit, and I think that that was one of the times in my life where it started to take that away, right? Made me a little bit more cautious, a little bit more hesitant to maybe to just go for things now that I reflect back on my life. So the next picture, raised by a single mom, that's us being a little bit older. I probably was, I don't know, 12, 11, 12 in that picture. And the south side of my grandparents' house. We spent a lot of time at my grandparents' house when we were bouncing between homes growing up, and living in a home my grandpa would fix up for us because he was a builder. And then, I shared my story, or I talked about how we would just destroy these houses, and my grandpa would move us back into his house, and we'd live there until he was all ready to try and do it all over again. Raised by a single mom who did the best that she could and with what she had and what she knew. Uh, and she worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs to provide for us. Never missed one of my games. Was always there. And growing up, I talked about how I took a lot of my anger and a lot of what I was feeling out on my mom because I blamed her for my dad not being there because I wasn't mature enough to see the full picture and really understand. And then the next picture I titled Feeling Awkward. And that's like for me, I think that was in 6th or 7th grade. And it doesn't really give it justice, this picture there, but if you just go to the Google machine and you type in Kid and Play, you'll see a picture of a famous rap group that pops up, and one of the guys has a very nice haircut that I was trying to emulate, or that we were trying to emulate, but I don't have super tight and nappy curls. Uh, I That's just not my hair, but we tried to make that work, and it didn't work. And the other part about the feeling awkward too is, I come from a family of wrestlers. Both my uncles were very notorious wrestlers in high school. One of my uncles was state champ. The other one would have been state champ if he didn't get hurt. And I was brought up in wrestling since I was a little kid, and kind of betrayed the family legacy when I chose basketball in high school. But my family has very big legs, and I had big legs. And not only did I have big legs, I had big feet. I had size 12. By the time I was in 6th grade, my feet grew like 4 sizes in 1 year. I could barely run around the gym without tripping over myself. So that, along with just being insecure about myself and about being biracial in a mostly white neighborhood, where I felt like I wasn't good enough for the white kids, and I wasn't good enough, I should say I wasn't white enough for the white kids, and I wasn't black enough for the black kids, really left me on the outside. And I had friends, but inside I struggled to fit in and to grasp that. So I felt extremely awkward in my body and in my skin. The next picture, Hello Ladies, I think that was maybe a 9th or a 10th grade picture, I think 9th. I started to come into my own, and to just grow into my body and to be confident in who I was, which was good. But there was a dark side to that, and that was with my dad not being there. And I don't care who you are, I believe that every person is born with this need inside them, and that need is the strongest need that we all have, and that's the need to be chosen. And that starts when we're babies and we want to be chosen by our parents, and then that carries over to As we grow up, we want to be chosen by our parents, and then we want to be chosen by our peers, and then we fall in love, and we want to be chosen by our partner or the opposite sex, right? And then in our marriage, we want to be chosen by them, and then it goes back to being chosen by those out in society, and then being chosen by our Creator. So it plays out in all these facets of our lives, and when we're not getting that in a certain area, right? When we're not able to meet that healthy need in a healthy way, we turn to unhealthy things. And for me, at a young age, it was sex. I turned to girls at a young age uh, to meet that need for me. And I talked about how that started something inside me. Um, that how do I say this? That began to play out in my life as I got older, and I chased after that uh, unquenchable thirst, maybe, I guess, as you could say it, right? The next picture is there of me at my high school graduation. I called that Father Wounds Part 2 because Dad he had been gone, so he came back in my life at 15. He was around for a couple of months, and then he had a huge blowout with my mom, which resulted in him showing up at the house high, uh, ripped off his shirt, screaming obscenities at my mom, picked up a giant rock, threw it through the front window of our front door. Very traumatic and disturbing situation, especially for me being 15 and just wanting nothing more than my dad to be in my life and to do things that sons are supposed to be able to do with their dads. And it ended up with my mom calling the police and my dad fleeing and him disappearing and us not seeing him until he showed up here at my graduation with the same old song and dance of he was going to be around and he was going to help me pay for college and or give me money for college, I should say, and all that type of stuff, and be there for my brother and my sister. But shortly after the graduation, he disappeared again, and that father wound was triggered in my heart yet again. And then the next picture, ATK 1091. Those are my brother's initials, Anthony T. King, and October 9th of 2001 was probably the hardest day of my life, and that's when my brother chose to commit suicide. And I was a sophomore in college, and I got a call from my two best friends, and I talked about that story and me going home and defaulting into my MO of just being a rock for other people and looking after others more than I looked after myself, and just the feelings that came with that and the hurt and finding my brother's uh, I guess last words on his computer and how that just rocked me to my core, and just dealing with that and the aftermath of me walking to my bedroom every night when I got home, just hoping and wishing with every fiber of my body that as I passed his doorway, I would see him just like I saw him last, laying face down on his bed, spread out, sleeping, and having to relive that over and over every day, but it it never changing, right? Um, Only time heals those kinds of wounds. And then the next picture of me in that Hornets jersey is me. I titled that "Fighting to Live," and that just summarizes me going back to college and dealing with depression and not knowing what I wanted to do and if I should even go back, and getting back into what I knew, which was basketball and working out and trying to find some sense of normalcy in my life, and how that helped me get out of that funk. And it was an extremely emotional time for me. You never realize, like, when you grieve, the process of grief, like, and how long it's going to last and what that's going to look like. I mean, And there was times where I just was an emotional wreck at practice, punching bleachers, you know, yelling, crying, because I just had all this emotion and I didn't know how to deal with it appropriately, And I saw a school counselor at that time, and that helped. But yeah, that was a fight, I was fighting, man. The enemy's trying to take me out. I had to fight with everything that I had, physically and spiritually, and figure out what that all looked like. So then the next picture down there is me, college graduation. Call that Father Wounds Part 3, because once again, Dad was going to show up on the scene. He called me and told me he was going to be at my college graduation, and he said the words I'll never forget. On the mid-sentence, he said, "When you see me, don't be scared." And it took my brain about 5 seconds to process that, and then to stop him from going on and asking him what he meant by those words, because those just aren't normal words you say to somebody. And he told me, he'd been diagnosed with stage 4 liver cancer, and they didn't know how much time he had to live, and that when I saw him, he wasn't going to look like I remember him. He wasn't going to look like he did in that high school graduation picture, right? He was going to look a lot different, and I shouldn't be taken back by that. And I don't know if he was at my graduation. I thought I saw a guy who looked like him coming down the stairs. I guess that really doesn't matter. But a few days later, he called me and asked me to come meet him at the person who was supposed to be my godfather at his house. And I went over there and I saw my dad, and he was right. He looked horrible. He looked like a skeleton with his skin stretched thinly over his bones, his eyes sunk in the back of his head. Very, very weak. Took a lot of strength for him just to stand up to greet me. And it was sad, and anger burned in my heart towards him. And at that moment, I couldn't be mad. I was mad at him, but I couldn't voice that, and I couldn't act on that, because seeing him in that state, I just had empathy for him, and I felt sorry for him. And we hung out for about 20 minutes before he had to go in and lay down, and sadly, a few weeks later he died. And at his funeral was another defining moment in my life, as I looked down in his casket and said my last respects and headed back to my seat. And all that anger, all that emotion, all those things I had pushed down for the 23 years of my life immediately came up to the surface. I was triggered by that, and I cried uncontrollably in my lap, and my life began to flash before my eyes, all these memories, and the one common denominator was he was hardly in any of them. A blip here and there. And I began to think about how angry I was that he didn't know anything about me, who I was, what I liked, nothing. And then I heard God's voice whisper to me in my ear, "I know everything about you." And immediately this peace came over me that's undescribable. And I stopped crying, and I was fine. I was good. I had peace. I had joy. I felt proud. It was an incredible experience. So then the next picture I got here is called The Rumble in the Jungle, and what do you do after you graduate from college and your dad dies, and you've just been through this traumatic experience. As you go to the Philippines on a basketball missions trip, and you play 30 games in 21 days, I think, or maybe it was less than me. It was 14 days. So long ago, man. But you go there, and I had the opportunity to, share all these things that I had been through, and the most recent thing with my father's death, and God telling me that He knew everything about me, and just to see people who have nothing. I mean, literally nothing. They're sleeping on mats in some areas in the jungle, and like bamboo strung together mats on dirt floors, but yet they've got a basketball court in the middle of their village, and the whole town comes out to see this game, and then to hear about your life and how you could go through something so hard, but still fight, still keep going on. It was a tremendous experience to share with them my story, and the love of God for them. And then the next picture I had here is we talked about covenant or contract, and it was about my marriage and another defining moment in my life. I talked about how I almost completely blew that thing up and would have ended up just like my dad, which was my worst fear growing up, and how I had to make a choice when a secret I had kept from my wife came out, and that was, did I make a covenant or a contract between her and God? If it was a contract, then so be it. I guess that could be broken and I could walk away. But that wasn't the case. It was a covenant. So that was the second time in my life God clearly spoke to me and told me to follow her wherever she went. Just for sake of time, I don't have time to rehash that story, but my wife, who had left that evening when God spoke that to me, within 10 seconds of him saying that to me, she walked back in the door and told me she wanted to make it work. And we ended up packing everything up and moving back to Chicago for the next events in our life. So I wanted to share all that with you because there was stuff that obviously I've talked about here that has happened since then, but these are pretty much the major defining moments in my life, and an overview of that and how those have shaped my life. And if there's a couple of themes that are running in there, and the first one is I didn't know what I didn't know, right? I didn't know what it looked like to be a man. I didn't know along this whole journey what was expected of me. I had an idea, I had some ideas, but I didn't clearly know. And maybe that's the power of 2020 hindsight, right? Is you can look back and figure those things out, and then use that wisdom to make a difference in other people's lives. The second thing is I didn't have much faith, but what I had, I put in Jesus Christ. I shared too a little bit about my salvation story and how that came about. And I didn't have much to hold on to, but I just trusted God and trusted God that He had a plan for my life, and that He would get through. He would get me through it. And the funny thing is my heart began to change before my mind began to change. All these moments in my life, someone once, and excuse my language, but someone once summarized it up, one of my friends, and said, you have every right in the world after everything you've been through to be a complete asshole. And the simple fact that you're not is a powerful testimony in and of itself. And now that I'm older, that is true, but it goes back to this third point, is my heart had to change before my mind began to change. A lot of times when people go through things, they think that their mind is immediately going to change. When they give their life to God, they think, they're the first thing that's going to change is their mind, or they're never going to battle, they're never going to struggle with negative thoughts or identity or all these things that happen to us. And that's not true at all. I still battle things every single day, but along this journey, it's apparent that the first thing it wasn't my mind that needed to change first, it was my heart that needed to change. And without that change of heart, that shift in my mind wouldn't have occurred. And then number 4, where we find our biggest hurt, we often find our biggest calling. It took me 38 years to, I guess, accept that, and to see that, and my biggest hurt in my life was my dad not being there for me, on me being left to figure this thing called manhood out on my own. But the incredibleness about that is God has used all these things, all these hurts, all these pains. He hasn't let them go to waste. And He's used that to bring that story to you guys and to so many other people, to help them and make a difference in our lives. And I don't know what you've been through, if you're watching this, but it's not in vain. And I would just encourage you to search that out and to think about those hurts, and how you might be able to use those to make a difference and to find your own calling. So that's the first perspective I want to share with you. That's my perspective. Now I want to share one more perspective with you, and then we'll get out of here for the night. So here's the second perspective, and this is a story, right, that I want to read to you. Now there was a man of the Pharisees named Nicodemus, a ruler of the Jews. This man came to him by night and said to him, "Rabbi, we know that you have come from God as a teacher, for no one can do these things that you do unless God is with him." Jesus answered and said to him, "Truly, truly, I say to you, unless one is born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God." Nicodemus said to him, "How can a man be born when he is old? He cannot enter a second time into his mother's womb and be born, can he?" And that's John 3:1-4. And then the story continues. Jesus answered, "Truly, truly, I say to you, unless one is born of water and the Spirit, he cannot enter into the kingdom of God. That which is born of the flesh is flesh, and that which is born of the Spirit is spirit. Do not marvel that I said to you, you must be born again. The wind blows where it wishes, and you hear the sound of it, but you do not know where it comes from and where it is going. So is everyone who is born of the Spirit." Nicodemus said to him, "How can these things be?" Jesus answered and said to him, "Are you the teacher of Israel, that you do not understand these things?" And that's John 3:5-10. So I want to offer you 3 observations from this passage and then close things out. The first one is that Jesus told Nicodemus that he needed to be born of the Spirit, and that's reflective of a spiritual rebirth that we all need in our lives. The second thing is must. Jesus didn't say you could, you should. He said you must be reborn again to enter the kingdom. It's an irreplaceable rebirth. Once it's happened once, nothing can ever take that away. And then 3, he made a personal invitation to Nicodemus. He said, "You must be born again." So we all have to go through a personal rebirth, a spiritual rebirth, and a personal rebirth. Looking back at my own story, that's exactly what happened. I'm still going through that personal rebirth that started so long ago in my life and is even carrying out today as I do what God's called me to do. So I don't know where you are in your relationship with God, and I don't know what you've been through in your life. Maybe you've been through a bunch of shit like me, and you're angry, and you're bitter at people in your life, whether it's your parents, whether it's friends, whether it's a complete stranger you don't even know who did something to you, who left a wound in your heart. I want to tell you that you don't have to keep living like that. That you don't have to go another day holding on to that shame, holding on to that guilt, holding on to that bitterness and unforgiveness. If you want, that can all end right now. And it's simple. So simple, we call it the ABCs of salvation. The first thing you need to do is you just need to admit that you're a sinner. We've all sinned. Doesn't matter. If you told a lie, you're a liar. If you've stolen something, you're a thief. Doesn't matter if you've done it once or 100 times. Second thing you need to do is you need to believe that Jesus died for you. Just like the Bible said he did. It's that simple. The third thing you need to do is you need to confess Jesus is the Lord of your life, and you need to make a decision to follow him. So maybe you don't know what all that looks like together. It's simple. You can just don't even need to do anything special. Just need to say with your mouth, God, I've sinned against you. Please forgive me. I believe that Jesus died for me. And I confess right now that he is the Lord of my life. And I ask him to come into my heart and to begin to change me. That's it. Nothing grand, no blood sacrifices, nothing crazy, man. Just a simple admittance, confession, and then request. And watch as God begins to change your life. This isn't a promise that it's going to get easier, but it is a promise that you will not be alone, and you won't have to struggle in the same way. So, if I can help you out with anything, you know how to find me. Shoot me a message. Happy to walk this out with you. Happy to support you on whatever decision you made. Next week, we're going to start the second half of Men's Fraternity, where we're really going to start to turn the corner, right? We've been looking back. Now we're going to start to look ahead. We're going to start to strategically think about our lives, our positions as husbands, our positions as fathers, our positions as leaders in the community, and really start to make some progress and at the same time challenge ourselves in a lot of these areas. I appreciate you guys watching as always. I love you guys. Take this extremely serious. Never do I want to come across as telling you guys what to do. I just want to present things to you, encourage you to listen to what God is speaking to you about those things, and do what he's impressing upon your heart to do. If I can support you in any way in that journey, if I can encourage you in any way in that journey, then I consider it my privilege to do so. As your friend and as your brother, even if I have never met you, even if we've never talked, you just silently sat there and watched these videos. And maybe you're new and you wonder, how can you say that? You don't know me. I don't need to know you, bro. But I know what it's like to be low, to be in that pit, right? And to wish someone would come along and accept you for who you are. Just love you. Stick their hand down there. Offer to help you get out. Maybe just crawl down in there and sit with you for a while. You know what that's like. So I don't need to know you personally. Alright, well, I think I've spoken enough for tonight, so I'll see you guys tomorrow for Saturday shout out. Appreciate you guys. Have a good night.